After Lincoln's re-election, Sherman set off on the campaign which would be called his March to the Sea. He would implement a tactic that he had started before but never put into full use: total war. His army would march from Atlanta to Savannah, where no army stood in their path. They would take little supplies with them, but collect their own, and burn and destroy the rest. He planned to burn and destroy his way through the South, bringing the war home to the civilians and breaking their will to fight. Sherman's army set off on November 15th, leaving Atlanta in flames behind them. Sherman ordered that nothing the Confederates could use be left standing, but the rearguard decided to burn down the entire town. It was a fitting beginning to the campaign. The army marched in 2 columns on different roads, altogether about 62,000 strong. The only thing standing in the way of Sherman and Savannah were 13,000 men, many of whom, in other circumstances, would have been considered unfit for service because of age. They attempted to make a stand at Griswoldville, charging across an open field, but they were easily defeated by Sherman's veterans. 1,100 Confederate men were lost, many of them boys and old men. Sherman's men met little resistance, and they were able to leisurely complete their work of destruction. Each day they destroyed a section of Georgia 10 miles long and 30 to 50 miles wide. They systematically tore up the railroad, and then heating the ties until they were bendable, they bent them in a hook around a tree, leaving Sherman's neckties, as they were called, scattered around the state. Sherman's orders were for foraging parties to be sent out to collect supplies for the army without entering into homes. Violations of these rules were often overlooked.
The skill and success of the men in collecting forage was one of the features of this march. Each brigade commander had authority to detail a company of foragers, usually about 50 men, with 1 or 2 commissioned officers selected for their boldness and enterprise. This party would proceed on foot 5 or 6 miles from the route traveled by their brigade, and then visit every plantation and farm within range. They would usually procure a wagon or family carriage, load it with bacon, cornmeal, turkeys, chickens, ducks, and everything that could be used as food or forage, and would then regain the main road. Often would I pass these foraging parties at the roadside, waiting for their wagons to come up, and was amused at their strange collections: mules, horses, even cattle, packed with old saddles and loaded with hams, bacon, bags of cornmeal, and poultry of every character and description. Although this foraging was attended with great danger and hard work, there seemed to be a charm about it that attracted the soldiers, and it was a privilege to be detailed on such a party. Daily they returned mounted on all sorts of beasts, which were at once taken from them and appropriated to the general use, but the next day they would start out again on foot, only to repeat the experience of the day before. No doubt, many acts of pillage, robbery, and violence were committed by these parties of foragers, usually called.
Sherman arrived outside Savannah on December 9th, having marched through the heart of the state of Georgia. He found Hardee entrenched there with 10,000 men. Sherman made contact with the Navy, ensuring that he would have supplies and artillery necessary for a siege. However, Hardee, instead of waiting for the siege, escaped on December 20th. The march to the sea was over. 300 miles of railroads had been destroyed. $100 million in damage had been done. $1.4 billion in modern dollars. Thousands of horses and cattle, 9.5 million pounds of corn, and 10.5 million pounds of fodder had all been taken from the citizens of Georgia.
We are not only fighting armies, but a hostile people, and must make old and young, rich and poor, feel the hard hand of war, as well as their organized armies. I know that this recent movement of mine through Georgia has had a wonderful effect in this respect. Thousands who had been deceived by their lying papers into the belief that we were being whipped all the time realize the truth and have no appetite for a repetition of the same experience.
Sherman's actions remained very controversial. For many years after the war, the name of Sherman was hated in the areas through which he marched. Even many of the slaves hated him, for they were hurt as much as anyone else on the plantations, and many of those who tried to follow the Union Army died along the way. The war affected every civilian in America, through the loss of friends and family, and to the economic problems which affected everyone. But Sherman's actions brought the military sufferings of war to the women and children of Georgia, inflicting scars that would remain for generations. Sherman's actions were immoral according to the Bible. The Old Testament law says that armies must not destroy the fruit trees of the land. God intended that the land not be destroyed so that it would remain productive. During the Civil War, every army, North and South, violated private property. Most commanders issued orders against it, but they enforced those orders to varying degrees. Sherman was different. He was intentional in his destruction. Although his soldiers took his orders beyond where he had written them, they can hardly bear the blame, since it was his strategic design for the campaign. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and share it with your friend. You can also visit www.discerninghistory.com for more videos and other resources.